In public remarks in late 2025, President Donald Trump suggested that the United States was ordering more B-2 stealth bombers. That may sound like a routine defense purchase, but in reality, building new B-2s would require reopening a production system that no longer exists, rebuilding an industrial base dismantled decades ago, and spending billions of dollars on an aircraft the US Air Force is already replacing. So when people say the United States is buying more B-2 bombers, the real question is not how many are being built. It is whether they actually understand what the B-2 is still used for today. And that misunderstanding is what makes the idea of simply buying more B-2s sound plausible. On its face, that sounds simple. But this was not a Pentagon announcement, and it was not tied to any official Air Force acquisition decision. The B-2 Spirit has not been produced for decades, and only about 20 aircraft remain in the inventory today. And because the fleet is so small, and the aircraft so well known, the claim spread quickly. For anyone familiar with the B-2 program, the idea sounds almost impossible, and the US Air Force is already in the process of fielding a new penetrating bomber, the B-21 Raider, designed to replace it. So, when a president publicly suggests that more B-2s are being ordered, it creates a powerful and misleading assumption. But one point must be made clear. As of today, the US Department of Defense has not confirmed any program to restart production or to increase the size of the fleet. There is no public contract to build new aircraft, no Air Force announcement, and no indication that the production line is being rebuilt. There are, however, large sustainment and modernization contracts supporting the existing fleet. The real story behind the so-called B-2 expansion is not about building new aircraft. It is about preserving and extending what a very small number of aircraft can still do. To understand why this claim resonates so strongly, it helps to look at how the B-2 is commonly perceived. For many people, the B-2 Spirit belongs to a past era, a Cold War stealth bomber, a technological marvel, and a financial disaster. That history created several common assumptions: that the B-2 is simply old, that it is primarily a nuclear bomber, that it is too rare to matter in real operations, and that it remains in service only because its replacement is not yet ready. All of those assumptions miss how the aircraft is actually used today. In some of the most sensitive strike planning scenarios, the B-2 still sits at the very front of the timeline. So what role does the B-2 actually play in modern planning? The B-2 was built to solve one specific problem: how to strike the most heavily defended and deeply protected targets at the very beginning of a conflict. In US planning, the B-2 isn't about volume, it's about penetration. It gives national leaders a way to reach targets that standoff weapons and conventional aircraft cannot reliably reach, without relying on forward bases or host nation permission. That role has already been demonstrated in combat, from Kosovo in 1999 to the opening night of the Iraq War. A B-2 can launch from the continental United States and strike targets across the globe. That reach is not just technical, it is strategic leverage. But that leverage only exists if the aircraft can still survive in today's threat environment. Another common misconception is that the B-2 has remained technologically frozen. In reality, the aircraft has undergone a continuous series of modernization and sustainment efforts. These include upgraded avionics and mission computers, improved communication systems, and long-running, low-observable and stealth sustainment work. One of the most visible efforts has been the modernization of the B-2's defensive management system, the suite responsible for detecting, identifying, and responding to modern air defense threats. A practical result of this is the aircraft's improved ability to adjust routing and tactics in flight as threat conditions change. It can receive updated threat information and sensor data, including refreshed threat libraries and cues from off-board surveillance and electronic support platforms. As a result, the B-2's survivability is being extended, its integration with joint and space-based networks is improving, and its ability to operate inside modern command and control architectures is being preserved. In other words, the Air Force is extending what each bomber can safely and credibly accomplish. These technical upgrades matter for more than just keeping the aircraft survivable. They also shape how the B-2 contributes to deterrence, which is something you won't find in a technical manual. At its core, deterrence is about belief. An adversary has to believe that the United States can still reach its most protected targets and carry out those missions in real combat conditions. The B-2 plays a special role in that perception. There are very few of them. Their missions are tightly controlled, and their deployments are usually tied to the most sensitive strike scenarios. When B-2s deploy to remote locations, such as Diego Garcia, those movements are closely watched by foreign militaries and analysts. They are meant to send a message. Even heavily fortified and deeply buried targets are still considered vulnerable. At the same time, the small size of the fleet also means there are clear limits on how often the aircraft can be used and how long those operations can be sustained. This is where the B-21 Raider comes into the picture. The aircraft is still in development and has not yet reached full operational status, but the Air Force is building it to take over as its primary penetrating strike bomber once it enters service over the next decade. In that sense, the B-2 is not being replaced in a simple one-for-one swap, nor is it competing with the next-generation bomber. Instead, it is helping bridge the gap as the force transitions to the B-21. Over time, the Raider is expected to become the backbone of U.S. penetrating strike operations. It is designed to carry out the same core penetrating strike missions as the B-2, but in much larger numbers, and with a very different approach to sustainment and upgrades. Unlike the B-2, the B-21 is being built from the start around an open, modular architecture that is meant to make ongoing modernization easier and to support higher day-to-day availability over its service life. Many of the operational and organizational changes that are expected to shape how the B-21 is eventually used are already being explored inside today's bomber force, including the B-2. That work is influencing how command and control is handled, how software updates and capability upgrades are delivered, and how bombers connect with off-board sensors and targeting networks. During this transition period, the B-2 also provides something strategically important: a hedge. If development schedules slip, if production ramps more slowly than planned, or if global tensions rise faster than new aircraft can be fielded, the B-2 remains a combat-ready penetrating bomber force today. And that hedge is becoming more important as the global threat environment continues to change. Preserving the B-2's relevance still matters, because long-range strike is becoming more important, not less. Air defense systems are getting better. Sensor networks are spreading, and modern denial environments are becoming more layered and more difficult to break into. In that kind of environment, the ability to physically penetrate defended airspace still matters. The B-2 helps absorb operational risk by preserving a credible penetration option today. It also absorbs program risk by reducing how much the United States depends on a perfectly timed B-21 rollout. And it lowers the chance of a gap in credible penetrating strike capability during a once-in-a-generation transition. So, the real importance of the B-2 today isn't how many of them are still in service. It's what the aircraft allows the United States to assume. It allows military planners to operate on the assumption that even the most heavily defended targets cannot be made completely unreachable. It allows senior leaders to think about early-phase operations without first having to solve the political and military problem of gaining access to foreign bases. And it allows the United States to treat denied environments as obstacles to be worked through, not hard barriers that stop operations altogether. That is why a single public comment about ordering more B-2s drew so much attention. Not because restarting production is actually realistic, but because the mission the B-2 still performs is unusually difficult to replace. The aircraft itself is approaching the end of its era. The strategic problem it was built to solve is not. The future of American long-range strike will belong to the B-21 Raider, but the credibility of that future is being protected today by the B-2. If you found this breakdown useful, you can subscribe for more focused analysis on military aviation, defense programs, and emerging security trends. Thank you for watching.